North Korean leaders have staged an apparent protest over annual military exercises between the United States and South Korea. Officials in Seoul say Pyongyang fired 2 ballistic missiles towards the Sea of Japan. They say the short-range missiles took off at around 6:30 a.m. local time Monday from the western port city of Nampo. They estimate the missiles travelled for about 500 kilometres before landing in the Sea of Japan. The officials suspect they were Scud ballistic missiles. Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe instructed members of his government to work closely with their counterparts in the US and South Korea to gather and analyse information. And he ordered them to secure the safety of nearby aircraft and ships.
The launch is a violation of the Japan-North Korea-Pyongyang Declaration, the joint statement of 6-party talks and UN Security Council resolutions. We lodged a strong complaint with North Korea right away.
The launch comes as South Korean and American troops kick off annual military exercises. About 210,000 troops are taking part in the drills in South Korea. North Korean leaders repeatedly demanded that the two countries scrap the exercises. They suggested they would respond with military action. South Korean officials are on the lookout for further provocations by North Korea.
The Korean peninsula faced a new standoff between the North and South along the demilitarized zone, conducting a complicated environment. On August the 20th, North and South Korean forces exchanged fire across the inter-Korean border. The South has also raised its military readiness alert to its highest level, Jundage 1. The latest exchange comes as tension is high on the Korean peninsula following the maiming of 2 South Korean soldiers by a landmine on August the 4th as they were conducting a patrol inside the South Korean half of the 4-kilometre-wide demilitarized zone, or DMZ, that separates the two countries. Seoul accused North Korea of infiltrating the DMZ and planting the mine. Also, South Korea began anti-North propaganda broadcasts from a number of towers along the border. Numerous statements over the past week regarding the start of the broadcasts and the ongoing annual joint Ulchi Freedom Guardian military exercise between the United States and the South. This year's drills, that began on August the 17th and are slated to run through to August the 28th, involve 50,000 South Korean soldiers and 30,000 US servicemen. Pyongyang views Ulchi Freedom Guardian as practice for an invasion of North Korea. Despite the alert levels, however, it is possible that the situation will rapidly de-escalate because both sides seek to practice restraint to avoid a larger conflict. On Saturday, the 2 Korean envoys began talks on the border crisis following tensions that saw an exchange of fire, a landmine explosion in the demilitarized border zone, and South Korea's propaganda broadcasts. As a result, North Korea has admitted it regrets South Korean soldiers' injuries in landmine blasts that fueled the border conflict and South Korea into the north. North Korea has also reportedly pledged to end a semi-state of war, while South Korea will stop its border broadcasts at noon Tuesday if no abnormal situations occur in the near future. The Koreas have also reportedly agreed to hold new talks in Seoul or Pyongyang as soon as possible. However, unlike the March 2010 surprise sinking of the ROKS Chonan, a South Korean Navy corvette, and the November 2010 bombardment of Yongpyong Island, the current skirmishes are taking place along the DMZ. Preventing a major escalation is significantly more complicated along this strip, where the presence of 2 armies in close proximity raises the risk of the escalation. The situation is further challenged by an aggressive South Korean stance supported by the US. According to Korean military sources, the US has been considering to dispatch B-52 or a B-2 Spirit stealth bomber and a nuclear-powered submarine currently stationed at Japan's Yokosuka naval base. In turn, North Korea has deployed about 20 amphibious landing craft to the northern limit line, the inter-Korean border in the Yellow Sea. Since the beginning of the standoff last week, Pyongyang has doubled its artillery power and sent more than 50 North Korean submarines. The US has previously dispatched its military assets to the peninsula to support Seoul in its standoff with Pyongyang 2 years ago. In April 2013, it had flown B-2 stealth bombers. Today, a significant role in solving the crisis in the Korean peninsula belongs to China. For it and Russia, the escalation will mean a rise of a new hot point around the borders. Amid the economic crisis and a destabilization of much key regions of the world, a new military conflict is not in the interests of China and Russia. In this context, we should point out an aggressive policy of the USA and a militarist rhetoric of South Korea. Once again, the US and its allies use any case for attempts to conduct a military conflict in Eurasia. Meanwhile, the Korean conflict is still unresolved. The region periodically goes through high tension that occasionally results in bloody military collisions. Both sides are keen to avoid a full-scale destabilizing conflict, but with millions of troops facing each other across the DMZ, the risk of escalation is ever present. The current standoff could still rapidly dissipate, but it is important to remember that war is a persistent risk under these circumstances.